Hi, my name is Gibson, and I'm the owner and founder of the Personal Development School. This is your daily breakthrough video, and today I want to talk a little bit about emotional eating and food addictions. And this is actually something a lot of people have reached out to me and requested, and it's really interesting. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the root causes in terms of the emotional patterns associated with this, in terms of the unmet needs associated with this, and in terms of some of the different points we're going to touch on that are related to some of the unconscious or subconscious patterns creating this in the first place. So if you're getting a lot of value out of these videos, before I start, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And also visit www.personaldevelopmentschool.com for all these upcoming courses we're launching. I'll have a course on this specifically in depth. And right now we're offering early bird prices. So if you go to the website right now and input your email and the courses you want to reserve early bird pricing for, you'll be able to do that online. So let's talk about this for a moment. So first and foremost, I think it's important to point out that sugar is actually a very addictive thing. So there was a study done, I believe it was in 2008 at the University of Bordeaux in France. And it was really interesting. What they did is they got mice or rats to basically become addicted to cocaine. And then they gave the rats or mice the option to choose mutually exclusively once these rodents were actually addicted, to choose mutually exclusively between cocaine and sugar water. And what this study found is that 97% of these rodents actually voluntarily put themselves through withdrawal from cocaine just to have sugar water. And it's not like brownies or cupcakes, literally just sugar water. So I think it's really an important fact to just give you some insight into how addictive sugar can be in the first place. And it's worth noting that this might not be the healthiest sort of thing that we get connected to and use as a coping mechanism. So this is something I see amongst the different attachment styles, so sort of like food addiction or really strong problems with emotional eating or sort of eating disorders of different types in the first place. The emotional patterns I find that are most common are guilt, shame, pressure, and overwhelmment. So normally people who are really struggling with this, I find that they're all struggling with these 4 underlying core emotional patterns. And it's almost like food becomes this form of self-medication. The needs that I find are most associated with food addiction or emotionally eating are the needs for comfort and emotional connection. And it's super interesting because if you think about it, what's your first experience of food? Your first experience of food is your mother's breast milk. And, when your mother's holding you and you're this little infant, there's tons of oxytocin, which is the bonding neurochemical, circulating between you and your mother during those times. There's a ton of oxytocin from breastfeeding. And so what do you receive? Well, the need that is being met at the time is tons of emotional connection and comfort. And so it's almost like because our subconscious stores these really early associations with food, when there's a lack of this need being met, we seek that out subconsciously. And you can sort of look at this as a feedback loop that, hey, if I'm emotionally eating, chances are I'm not maintaining a healthy space of comfort and I'm not getting my needs met for emotional connection. So it's a really important piece of feedback that way. And we're going to get into how to actually deal with these things. The next thing I see all the time as well is it's almost like an eating disorder is really just a thinking disorder. It's like we self-medicate, and really what we're trying to escape or self-medicate from is our incessant, repetitive internal thoughts and the emotional responses they elicit. So when you're, really self-critical, really guilting or shaming yourself, or really feeling pressure and beaten down and just overwhelmed, you're having all of these thoughts first. So you have your external reality, and then you have the way you're interpreting it and how your thoughts are perceiving and processing that and the emotional responses they're eliciting. And if you're self-medicating with anything, whether it's food or drugs or alcohol or whatever it might be, you're trying to escape something. And it's not that you're trying to necessarily escape your external reality. It's more often than not that you're trying to escape an unhealthy internal reality. So if you have a ton of negative internal dialogue circulating all day, you've got a ton of negative emotions as a result. It's like that quote, there's no such thing as stress, there are only stressful thoughts, and that's really true to a certain degree. So if you're having all of these negative thoughts, all of these negative neurochemical reactions, all of this stress internally, at some point you're just trying to escape from that. And this is when people turn to different forms of self-medication, of course, one of those being food. Another thing I see all the time with people struggling with this is that they tend to almost be slightly dissociated from their body. It's like they sort of, at some point, stopped actually feeling their appetite, stopped actually connecting to their feelings of like hunger and fullness. And appetite actually became like a mental thing as opposed to a body thing. And oftentimes there's a connection here that people who are emotionally overeating are not actually feeling like they're connected to and in their body, rooted in their body throughout the day. I see this all the time. So what you can think of is, actually, I want to say two more things. One other thing I see very, very often is that sort of that disconnect from the appetite becoming mental or emotional instead of an actual physical response to hunger, is that oftentimes people who are really struggling with food or have an unhealthy relationship to food also had parents who were like, finish everything on your plate, and actually rewarded the children or punished them if they didn't finish everything on their plate, or rewarded them if they did. And so again, like that's a really good framework or construct to make appetite become something that's mental, emotional, because we're actually building in positive or negative associations at the mental, emotional level that then gets stored subconsciously. And one other thing is, oftentimes, and there's a lot of research to back this up, food, when we're eating it, and we're actually not even really tasting food as much as we're tasting the memory of food. And I'll put a link to a study at the bottom of this that has a lot about that in greater detail. But oftentimes when we're not mindfully eating, if we're not actually present with our food, we're sort of in a low level hypnotic trance, and whatever stored associations we have around food from the past, as we're eating, we're actually not even present with the taste of the food and the texture and all these different things. It's like we're sort of accessing and surfacing subconsciously stored associations in our relationship to food from past experiences. So it's super interesting. So according to these different pieces, let's talk about how we can actually overcome some of these core problems at the subconscious level instead of treating the symptom of overeating or having an unhealthy relationship to food. What's really underneath are all those core things. So number one, related to the guilt and shame. If you are struggling so much with guilt and shame, or pressure and overwhelm and lots of negative internal dialogue, that's what you want to be cleaning up, is actually recreating and reconditioning your thought patterns. So you can do this in a variety of different ways, but for the sake of this video, I'll just outline a couple key ones. There's a ton of research, and what we're really putting together is that a lot of guilt and shame come from a lot of enmeshment trauma. So if you have this unconscious belief or set of unconscious beliefs related to, I'm responsible for other people's feelings, I have to solve people's problems, I have to take care of how other people feel, it's like you're basically putting all of this extra burden on your plate all the time that really are not even necessarily solvable problems, because at the end of the day, in like the depths of reality, you are not responsible for how other people feel. Their thoughts about you, or their thoughts about life, or their behaviors or their decisions, those are the only things in a person's internal reality that can elicit an emotional response. Because whatever you are doing or not doing is basically passing through their filter of expectations and beliefs and programming. And so at the end of the day, you can't create how a person feels. Only their thoughts about you can create how a person feels. Okay, so it's really important, number one, to start working on reconditioning that belief. Start noticing, start reprogramming that you are not responsible for other people's feelings, and start setting healthy boundaries as a result. Number two, because there's that correlation with the shame, you want to make sure that you're not shaming yourself in your internal dialogue, that you're not speaking negatively towards yourself, giving yourself a hard time, having self-defeating thoughts. Like if you're noticing that, you really want to work on like breaking up those thought patterns, sort of like scar tissue, and replacing them with healthier, more positive thoughts. The next piece, if you are related to those needs. So, because there's such a strong correlation between emotional eating and then literally 2 unmet needs of comfort and emotional connection, what you want to do is create healthier, updated strategies consciously, intentionally, to get those needs met for comfort and for emotional connection. And if you are getting those needs met really strongly, your brain isn't going to have to go rely on that outdated strategy, sort of out of that state of desperation to go get its needs met for emotional connection and comfort through food, because it's also a really unfulfilling way at the end of the day to get those needs met. And your brain is always trying to come up with the fastest way of getting its needs met, not necessarily the best or the most effective. So again, like if we consciously update those strategies and meet those needs intentionally, we're also creating a much greater likelihood of feeling truly and deeply fulfilled in the form that we get those needs met from. Another thing, because of that sort of hypnotic trance and that we sort of taste the memory of food more than we're actually present with food itself, it's really important to practice things around mindful eating. So when you eat, don't just eat on autopilot and just, not pay attention to your appetite and your feelings. Actually set the intention to sit down, be present with your food, taste the texture. There's tons of resources and information around mindful eating, and you can check some of those out, or just, set the intention that when you're eating food that you'll be there and present and you won't be watching TV or doing, 30 other things while you're eating. And that's super important. When it comes to getting in touch with your feelings and needs, because of that dissociative aspect that's often correlated with emotional eating or addictive patterns of eating, it's also really important to feel like you're getting back in your body, rooted and grounded in your body. So that you can do things like body scans to get you back rooted and in touch with your body. You can do yoga, keep a feelings and needs journal, because really like your feelings and needs are rooting you in your body, because feelings or emotions are basically just sensations in your body. And needs, if we're dissociated from our needs, then, we sort of lose that sustained connection with ourselves. And by getting back in touch with our needs, we stay grounded and rooted in the relationship to ourselves. And this has a massive impact as well. And then lastly, the 2 last points I want to put in here are you also have to learn how to relax. I find that people who are emotionally overeating, they don't know how to actually just sit still and be calm and sort of just be with themselves. They tend to feel like they have to sort of eat to numb, and then it's only at that point, once they're numb and full and exhausted, that they can sort of sit still. And so that's a really important thing. We really want to be able to balance like the doing energy in our lives, that sort of masculine energy of like productivity, efficiency, busyness, with the being energy, which is that ability to actually be peaceful and reflect and passive, to sort of have some of that passive energy available to us sometimes. And it's really important to be in that space from time to time, because we can get so caught up in that hamster wheel of life of going and going and doing. And we want to be able to move out of that and be reflective and connect to ourselves and have that relationship to ourselves sometimes. And I personally find meditation to be a fantastic way of doing that. And lastly, if you are self-medicating in any way, chances are you are not processing your emotions. So I have a whole video about how to process your emotions, and it gives you, 5 key steps to actually process your emotions and digest them and sort of clean out negative emotions that you might experience at the end of the day. So feel free to check out that video for step-by-step directions. But often people, when they're self-medicating with anything, are in some kind of emotionally triggered state. And rather than, having an emotionally triggered state and then just reacting by having an unconscious coping mechanism, like some form of self-medication, it's so important and so helpful to be able to actually work that system backwards. We're feeling triggered, we have negative emotions. Okay, what thoughts am I having? What beliefs am I having? What needs do I have? And to actually use those emotions as sort of like a guidance mechanism that, hey, something's out of balance or something's not quite right, so we can go fix and correct the problem at the root level. So please check out that video for more detailed step-by-step directions. I hope this gave you some really interesting information. I will be launching a course on this specifically in tons of detail, August of 2019. So again, if this is something you're interested in, please go to the Personal Development School website at www.personaldevelopmentschool.com. and feel free to reserve your seats for these online courses launching soon. Okay, thank you so much for watching.